Okay, hi. So the goal of this video, which is the second in this series on LabVIEW, is to understand Booleans and while loops. So when we think about a Boolean, we're typically thinking of whether or not something is true or false. And we can use that to help us with our coding in a lot of cases. So let's go ahead and look and remind ourselves that we have our front panel followed by our block diagram, where again, in our front panel is where the user would interact with the code, and the block diagram is where the coding occurs. If we come to our block diagram, let's go ahead and just come to Boolean. Remember, we right click, we can see all of our possible things to place on our block diagram. And you see that there's comparison. And for all these comparisons, or most of them at least, you'll see that we have questions. For example, are these two things equal? And the output of that would be either true or false. That's how that is determined. So I'm going to place an equal sign here. And as we discussed last time, I like to use the help function a lot to just kind of show what's going on. If I come and highlight this, you'll see that you can look at what this block is doing. So this is saying that it will return true if x is equal to y, where x is the first input and y is the second. So let's go ahead and just create some constants here just to show this part. Let's say that this is 3, and we'll also say that this is 3. And we expect the output to be true. Now, as we discussed last time, I can run this and we don't see anything because we haven't taken the output of this and connected it in any way to something that the user can see in the front panel. So if I want to see something here, I want to create something over here. And as a quick test, do I want to create a constant, a control, or an indicator? If you want to pause it for a second and ask yourself after watching the first video, go ahead. But we know that a constant is just the number. That's what I just did on the left side. We know that a control is something the user has control over, and an indicator will indicate the value of something or display it. If I create indicator, you'll see that I will get a box to show up. Now, what's interesting is that you note that the color of this wire is different than the color of the other wires. That depends on the data type of the wire, what's associated with what's traveling on that wire. So the wire color is based on the data type. And once you start to use LabVIEW, you can get a little bit more familiar with what is what. But when we have true or false or Boolean outputs or inputs, they are going to have this green type of dashed color. So when we drop this, we ended up with this button in the front panel. I'll make it bigger, and you can see I made it bigger just by going to find these blue dots by hovering over it, and I can change the size of it if I want. And I can even turn it on and off on the front panel, but it doesn't really matter because it's an indicator and it'll change as expected. So the question is x equal to y? In this case, it is. So what do you think will happen? Well, if 3 is equal to 3, this output will be true, and that will turn this light on. Because when something is true for Boolean operations, we usually say that's a value of 1, while false is 0, and we say that true is on and false is off. So if I were to run this, you see that the light turned on because of the fact that it is true. If I change this, I'll shut this off just to show. If I make that a 4 now, and I run it, nothing happened to the button. Okay, that's interesting. Let's say I were to do some sort of other comparison where I come to comparison and I'm going to check if, no, not comparison, I'm going to go to Boolean, where you see under Boolean, you have different sorts of operators, like logic gates, essentially. So let's say I wanted to use and if you're not familiar with this, the general idea is that if you have an X and a Y input and they are both true, then your output is true. The key word is and. They both have to be true in order for that thing to turn on. If one of them is false, then nothing will happen. So let's say I take our output from here and I put that into one of the inputs of this AND. See that X is one, Y is the other. I'm going to take the true or false value from there and put it into here. And we're trying to see if this and something else is true. So as a demonstration that we can have Boolean controls, let's create a control. And they give us this type of button this time. And you can change the way these buttons look and stuff if you don't like it. Let's say that I just make this like, I'll call it second test or something. I'll make this button bigger too. What this is going to test is whether or not both of these outputs are true. So I'll come here, do another indicator, and I'll say both true. Oops, both true. So again, what we're doing in this type of thing is checking if both of these are true. So this first one, I can double click and see that this is the first one. Let me call this something else. Maybe we'll call this first test. I'm gonna make these really big. Cool. First test and second test. If you look, this first test is an indicator. It may be hard to tell, and honestly, I can't really tell. I don't have the buttons memorized. But if you were to click this and look at our block diagram, we see over here that this is being fed something. So this is going to be indicating something, while this one is our control, because I am going to be clicking this button and changing the value of it as the input to the AND gate. So I want both of these to be true, and if they are both true, this light will turn on. So if we run it currently, we see that this output here is true because they're both 3, which means that going into this top terminal of the AND block is a true value. While the second test in control is, I'm going to leave it off for now, just to show that this output won't turn on. So if we click this, what just happened? Well, this turns on. That's this one. That turns on because the 3 equals 3. This is AND, or this is off, and the fact that we're putting that into an AND with this true output, that automatically means that this will be false. Let's go ahead and kind of write that table out. If they're both on, that will produce an on. If one is off, the output will be off. And if they are both off, then the output is off as well. This is what we call an AND, because both of them need to be on or true. So now let's go ahead and now I'll turn that on. So now this will be outputting a true value into here. And we'll be seeing that this is true as well. So if I run this, now this is turned on, this both true, because of the fact that the 2 inputs here are both true. If I were to change this to something else and rerun it, well, we see automatically that this is not going to be true because 5 is not equal to 3, which means that this won't turn on. Let's replace that possibly with an OR. So I'm going to delete this. And what I'm going to do is I'll do Control B. That was our shortcut for breaking up the wires. And then I'll rewire everything. I know that this was going into one of the inputs of the AND, so I'll put it there as the other input to OR. The idea of OR is that is either of them on? So if it's on, this will be on. If this is on, off, this will also be on, off, on. This is on. If they are off, off, then it is off. Or is the key word there. If this or this, true. Let's go ahead and have both these off. If we run this, 3 and 5 aren't equal. This button was off. This button was off, which means that this will be off because neither of them are true. If I put one of them on, that OR will end up turning that final LED on because one of them was true. This is false. This is true because it's or. That's okay. We'll have an output that's true. I can bring that back to being a 3. I can turn that button off. I'll turn that off just to show it turn on. If we do that, we see our first indicator is true, and they both are true. That's good. Now, of course, if I have them both turned on, they'll stay all turned on in this situation. But that's the idea of a Boolean, where we have some true or false value, and we will leverage that when we go ahead and do while loops. And I think I'm going to do it in another video just to spread it out a bit. So that's the end of this video where we just discussed the concept of Booleans in LabVIEW. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.